After studying this module, you shall be able to know about various cultural differences in personality, learn why and how people belonging to different cultures differ in various dimensions of personality. Identify the major areas of research within the topic and topics of future research. Evaluate your knowledge about the topic. Analyze the previously done researches that can be replicated or redesigned in the Indian setting. Personality is a function of both genetic and environmental factors. Among environmental factors, culture plays a very influential role. Culture comprises of shared meaning systems that become standard of perceiving, believing, evaluating, communicating and acting among the ones who share a language, a historic period and a geographic location. Culture is passed from one generation to another through language, values and artifacts, media message, culture practice and institutions, and through the modeling of behavior. The focus on culture and personality emerged as a reaction against the 19th social evaluation and diffusionism. Lewis Henry Morgan and Edward Taylor were the early evolutionists who held the belief that each culture goes through the same hierarchical evolutionary system. This view was confronted by Franz Boas and some of his students. There is some debate on exactly how the field emerged. Some believe it developed from an interaction between anthropology and Freud's psychoanalysis, which suggests that the field began in 1918 and with Y.I. Thomas and Florian publication, The Polish Peasants in Europe and America. Thomas and Zanicki stated, when viewed as a factor of social evaluation, the human personality is a ground of the causal explanation of social happenings. When viewed as a product of social evaluation, it is causally explicable by social happenings. The field developed more with later work by Margaret Mead and Ruth Benedict. Mead's Coming of Age in Samoa, 1928, provided the first sustained consideration of the relation between personality and culture. Interest in culture and personality thrived in the 1940s and was viewed as an exciting and influential paradigm in the social sciences. A debate of interest which has emerged from the field is the importance of emic and etic in advancing knowledge in psychology and the value of universality versus culture relativism. These dilemmas plague those engaged in indigenous, cultural and cross-cultural research. These are three differing positions held by anthropologists and social psychologists in terms of importance of commonalities in human nature and emphasis on cultural context in studying human behavior. Absolutism, relativism and universalism. Absolutism de-emphasizes the role of culture and focusing solely on studying common human nature. Relativism suggests it may be much of more appropriate to concentrate on describing human being in relation to their socio-cultural environment. Universalism emphasizes that the importance of psychological universals as well as is sensitive to cultural context. According to recent views, the most recent core propositions of these fields were participants of a particular culture internalize the ethos of that culture and develop a common corresponding personality structure. Second, culturally shaped childhood experiences can predict adult personality patterns. Third, adult personality characteristics common in a country impact its culture, social trends and psychopathology. Later Sapir and Wallace talked about the concept of model personality, which focuses on within culture individual variation in personality, that is, the existence of both prevalent personality types in each culture and individual variability. During the last decade, there have been many cultural studies conducted on issues such as self-processes, emotions, and personality traits, establishing that the culture is an important determinant of what it means to be a person. Thus, irrespective of whether the culture influences all the individuals of that culture similarly or there are individual variation, has been an important question to be catered to into the study of culture and personality. Culture personality psychology generally has three main goals. First, to find out the cause underlying the cultural diversity, to find out how human psychology molds culture, and to find out how culture shapes human psychology. Now, major approaches to exploring and explaining personality across cultures. First, evoked culture. Evoked culture is defined as a set of predictable responses of people belonging to a particular culture to do some specific environmental conditions. According to this approach, there are two aspects necessary to explain in variation in culture. First, an underlying universal mechanism such as competitiveness. Second, environmental differences in the intensity of activation of the underlying mechanism. That is, cultures where there are more eligible candidates has people who are more competitive. Few examples are provided next. Evoked cooperation. Every human being has the capacity to share and cooperate, but it is the environmental conditions that activate or deactivate such behaviors. For instance, the pattern of cooperative food sharing has been found among different bands of hunter-gatherer tribes. There are certain tribes such as Act tribe of Paraguay that share difficult to fetch food items such as meat based on the principle of reciprocity. It has been observed that cooperation and sharing varies from the tribe to tribe based on the food supply. Evoked mating strategies. Belsky, Steinberg and Draper did an extensive research on the topic. It was found that children who have been reared in a harsh and rejecting environment, inconsistent pattern of providing resources and marital discord tend to develop a personality of impulsivity, inability to rely on single mate, and as a result tend to opt for a sexual life that starts early and inclines them towards having multiple mates. On the other hand, children who have been reared in a sensitive, supportive and a responsive environment have been provided with reliable resources and have been observed with reliable resources and have observed spousal harmony tend to develop conscientiousness and commitment in relationships leading to stable marriages. Evidence also confirmed that there are within group similarities and between group differences in mating strategies, as Buss found that in China marriages are long lasting, whereas in Sweden divorce is common. Now, evoked aggression. Nisbet proposed that aggression is displayed more in the cultures where one's means of subsistence can be rapidly undermined, such as herding economics where one's entire stock could have been stolen by thieves. So to scare off the prospective thieves, people of that culture create a reputation of an aggressor. Transmitted culture. It consists of ideas, values, attitudes and beliefs that are transmitted from one generation to another through direct or indirect interaction. Cultural differences in moral value. Moral behavior, what is right and what is wrong are important aspects of human personality that guides an individual behavior. Children learn cultural views on morality early in life. These moral values are not passed through genes, rather are taught by parents and teachers or learned through observations within one culture. An example of moral values in a particular culture could be Semang of Malaysia. For them, it is sinful to comb one's hair during rain, to watch dogs mate, to torture a helpless animal, to kill a sacred wasp, to have a sexual intercourse in daytime and so on. Cultural differences in self-concept. Self-concept of people in different culture relies on their cultural belief in either interdependence or independence. According to Trindis, in individualistic society, people tend to act independently of their groups, giving priority to personal goals and rather to group goals. They act according to their own attitudes and desires rather than succumbing to their norms and the attitudes of their group. On the other hand, in the collectivist society, people are interdependent on each other. They give more priority to the goals of their intergroup. These people in collectivist societies are highly concerned about their social relationships. They focus more on relationships than fulfilling one's own wishes and goals. Using the 20 statements test, researchers have discovered that US participants had tend to describe themselves with regard to their individual characteristics such as smart, stable, dependable, and open-minded, whereas Chinese participants in contrast more often describe themselves in terms of their social roles such as I am a good daughter or I am Jane's friend. Cultural differences in self-enhancement. Self-enhancement is the tendency to describe oneself using positive attributes which are valued socially, such as calm, honest, intelligent and hardworking. Such tendencies towards self-enhancement remain stable over time. Researchers have found Westerns, for instance, Americans tend to have positive description of themselves as compared to Easterns, for example, Japanese. Cultural universals. There has been an attempt to identify features of personality that are present in almost all the cultures, which are beliefs about personality characteristics of men and women. William and Best did a large-scale study over a period of 15 years in which they collected data from 30 countries. The countries represented continents such as Europe, Asia, Africa and South America. In each country, college-going students were asked to observe 300 adjectives commonly used in their countries and also indicate that a particular adjective is more often linked to males, females or both. The findings were very astonishing, as there was tremendous consensus among countries in the way they associated many of the traits adjectives with different genders. Expressions of emotions. In the book The Expressions of Emotion in Man and Animals, Charles Darwin has expressed the same state of mind is expressed throughout the world with remarkable uniformity, and this fact is in itself interesting as an evidence of those close similarities in bodily structure and mental disposition of all the races of the mankind. Psychologist Paul Ekman in his classic research displayed photographs of people with 6 basic emotions to natives of different continents. He found that happiness, sadness, anger, fear, disgust and surprise were the 6 basic emotions which were universally recognized by people belonging to various cultures. 5-factor model of personality. A fascinating question is whether there is a universal structure of personality such as the 5-factor personality model or whether different factorial models exist in different cultures. Researchers are divided in their findings and conclusions. Researchers with the first approach, that is, 5-factor model is universally applicable, have done various studies such as transport and test, in which they translated Big 5 inventory in various languages and administered it in countries such as France, Holland, Philippines. Using this strategy, they have been able to find that 5-factor structure of personality is general across cultures. Researchers with the second approach, that is 5-factor structure of personality is not universal, have replicated the transport and test study and found out that 5-factor model was understood by natives who were relatively high in general cognitive abilities. Now, differences between Eastern, particularly Indian and Western culture vis-a-vis personality. Individualism versus collectivism. In Western culture, individuality is the most important value and relatedness comes second. A person who has a choice to whether to make a certain relationship with other people or not. as it is essentially a work and activity centered culture. Relationships such as marital, family, friends, colleagues and so on have to be developed by working for these on the basis of shared commonalities. In the West, the relationships to societies are viewed from an egocentric perspective, in contrast to sociocentric perspective of the East. In the Eastern culture, a person is an embedded instrument in relationships. Child rearing practices. Culture impact personality tremendously through the child rearing practices. Roland highlights differences in early child rearing practices between Western and the Indian culture. In the West, children are expected to have their own voices, preferably different from that of their parents. For adolescents, leaving home is considered as a very important developmental task. On the other hand, Eastern culture gives emphasis to dependability. The atmosphere of home is characterized by indulgence, physical proximity, common sleeping arrangements, immediate gratification of needs, and sometimes prolonged babyhood. This kind of a well-knit culture leads to an inner sense of security and strength. Indians have a very tolerant attitude toward children, even under the most difficult circumstances. From the Western point of view, this can often be seen as a culture of spoiled children. Now, nuclear and extended family dynamics. In India, children spend most of their formative years with their grandparents. Many families of brothers have common residence, ritual activities and cooking arrangements. There are joint celebrations of religious festivals, family rituals and traditional ceremonies to keep the family ties intact. With changing time, such pure form of joint families are reducing and rather intergenerational families have become more common, wherein the parents live together with one of their grown-up children. According to Kumar, one might think that an indulgent and tolerant approach to child rearing would result in a very naughty children. However, it does not. Indian children are generally quite well behaved. Actually, Indian children do not need to throw tantrums to seek attention, as they get so much already from a host of relatives that they have. However, in the Western culture, the elderly wants to remain self-reliant and independent. They do not want to become dependent on their children. Children also do not feel the need to look after their parents, as they have not seen their parents taking care of their own parents, and vis-a-vis, the children once grow up should not be monetarily dependent on their parents. Expressions of emotions. Westerners believe in self-expressions, that is, direct and clear communication. Indians, on the other hand, tend to express feeling in such a way that it does not hurt or harm anyone. They emphasize on indirect and metaphorical communication. According to the theory of rasa, in the Indian culture, emotions are grounded not only in the self but also in the play, music, food and the scent. The purity of food in terms of emotional and moral sense is more important than its nutrient values. As learning from the Eastern way of method of emotional expression, the postmodern therapeutic framework has begun to place a greater value on indirect communication, clearly acknowledging and utilizing its enormous therapeutic and protective power. Now, pathology and coping strategies. There is a rise in narcissistic disorder in the West. Protect yourself from the demands of others and take care of yourself first. Even when no pathological problem exists, narcissistic trait of grandiosity and idealization are encouraged as behavior norms. Faced with the diminished sense of responsibility, more and more of us have turned inward, increasingly towards self-fulfillment. Now, however, important part of our society regards narcissism as a goal, not a problem. Many who feel they are living according to the norms of the society now ends up in therapy confused over their feeling of emptiness, isolation and desperation. Moving on to coping strategies, Ola found that adolescents in the European countries are frequently reported assimilative coping strategies attempts to change the environment to their own benefit, for example, problem focused, task oriented and confrontative, etc. Then boys and girls in India and Yemen who preferred emotion focused solution, for example, accommodative. Both heredity and environment influence human personality. Culture plays a significant role in the domain of environment. Researchers have found significant intercultural differences in personality as well as similarities in personality of people belonging to the same culture. However, researchers has also found individual variation within the same culture. Thus, there are both prevalent personality types in each culture as well as individual variability. Emic, culture specific, and etic, transcending culture, are the constructs that have led to three differing positions held by anthropologists and social psychologists in terms of importance of commonalities in human nature and emphasis on cultural context in studying human behavior, absolutism, relativism, and universalism. Cultural personality psychology generally has three key roles. First, to find out the causes underlying the cultural diversity. Second, to find out how human psychology molds culture. And third, to find out how culture shapes human psychology. There are three models that can explain personality across cultures. Firstly, evoked culture. It means that every culture has certain environmental characteristics that lead the people there to develop a unique personality. Secondly, transmitted culture, that is, the belief and the values of the ancestors of a cultural society passed on from a generation to generation, making their thoughts and any actions unique. And lastly, cultural universal. There are certain aspects of personality that are universally accepted through varied cultures. There are significant differences in Eastern and Western cultures, such as West has egocentric perspective while the East has sociocentric perspective. Child rearing practices are quite different, which have a major impact on personality. Also in East, like West, extended family scenario is common. They differ to the extent of differently expressing their emotions. Due to all these differences, the incidence of psychopathology and form of coping strategies also differ in these cultures.